Dis 3:30 en jy is ingeskakel by Maluti FM 97.1. Ons program Sant in die Uurglas en ons insetsel is leefstyl. Ons gaan vandag gesels met Dave Henderson. Dave, how are you today?
I'm awesome. Thanks so much for having me.
Wonderful. Dave, how's the weather down in Cape Town?
It's actually been beautifully miserable. It's typically always happy. And so when we get some cloud cover, I actually do a little dance because that's more my kind of weather.
Dave, we want to introduce you to our listeners. So tell us what you do and how long have you been in the Cape?
Cape Town, I've been in for probably about 3 years now. So still getting used to the Cape Town way of doing things. And the publishing business itself has probably been around 8 years strong. So I actually started that before I came to Cape Town up in Joburg. Quite a few years back.
Dave, you used to be a part of the corporate scene and you left that for publishing. What sparked that interest?
That's right. I think I'll give you the abbreviated version because it wasn't a lightning strike moment, and I think frustration and how to cope with frustration never is necessarily a lightning strike and you decide, great, I'm done. And basically it was born out of years of frustration of working within corporate and not being 100% happy and struggling to figure out why. And it ranged from, bad bosses to bad business to bad pay. And being an engineering background, I tend to write things down like pros and cons. And basically what came out of a bit of brainstorming was I figured out a little bit more of who I was, and that working within someone else's business within corporate where I didn't have a great degree of control of my career. And that was the one ingredient. The second ingredient was the opportunity where my father, who writes books, essentially said, I need help. I want to get my books out there. Physical books, print books, at the local bookshops aren't doing it for me anymore. What can you do about getting this whole digital, ebook thing created and published online? And essentially, my dad ended up being customer number one, where I fell in love with the process of getting an author out there online, and because I saw what it did for him. I started, and so that's where the seed, I guess, was planted.
Dave, how do you pave the way for new authors to publish their books?
So when you say pave the way, so funny enough, because we throw in words like ebooks and Amazon, a lot of people get, they think there's a magic tree. There's a magic route, there's a magic way to get your book sorted, and everything's changed because of ebooks. The beauty of ebooks and going online is nothing actually has changed in terms of, for example, how people find books. The primary method is still actually word of mouth. And Amazon, for example, the biggest ebook shop in the world, facilitates this. So where writers follow this journey to get their work into the hands of as many readers as possible, the old formulas haven't really changed. To have your book finished, to make sure that you put as much love and effort into your books. I think writers possibly just have more options now, where previously going to a big name publisher felt like the only option. What you have nowadays, and what our company does, is it essentially gives authors who don't want to go that route, or who have tried to go that route and been possibly rejected, we give them an alternative.
Well, we'll be looking at all those alternatives in the coming weeks. Well, Dave is going to introduce a new book to us by Angela de Egville. But first, we're going to listen to Aching, Know Your Bones. Enjoy this one with us. We're talking to Dave Henderson down in the Cape. Dave, you were telling us about a new book that's just come on the market.
That's right. So obviously what we do is we help self-published authors get their books online, or get their books out there and online. And one of the authors we recently had the pleasure of helping was Angela de Egville. And essentially, her story is very similar to how many authors start their journey, where you have your book, you've written your book, and then you kind of get to the point where, what now? Where do I go? Where do I publish? And how do I get this to readers outside our country? Because generally, a lot of authors get stuck at that point where, the book's created, but then languishes in a local bookstore. And so Angela essentially came to us with the book created, but wondering what next. And so the process we helped Angela through essentially sees her material, it gets digitized, taken online, not only in a digital or ebook format, but also the paperback. And what that means is, as an author, she's able to leapfrog the typical geographical boundaries and get her book online internationally, not just in digital, but also in a paperback format that anyone in the world can order, where the reader ordering pays for the printing and shipping.
Dave,
so it's known as print on demand.
I believe Angela is South African born, but she currently resides in England,
right.
Hey?
That's right. She actually moved fairly recently, so absolutely South African, and then she's made the decision recently to move across to the UK. So a lot of our conversations happen over WhatsApp. But yeah, her book is very much a South African story, essentially, where she takes her family history and she fictionalizes it, so she gets into more of a story form, but it's based on the actual events that she had researched.
That sounds wonderful. Dave, you're going to tell us more about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So what I can do, and you can stop me if things sound too terrible, is I can read from Angela's introduction.
We would love that.
Essentially, just to give you a feel for what Angela's written. And bear in mind that there are so many stories like this in the country where, authors have, I think South Africa in particular has such a colorful history that these sorts of stories tend to be our bread and butter. Not only what we like to read, but potentially also what people are writing, because of the amount of history, painful and not painful, that people have. So these sorts of stories are more commonly found. And if your readers like this, if they enjoy this sort of story, it's something that we can absolutely delve into potentially on future episodes as well.
Dave, before you do a reading, we're going to play your second song, Lost in Hollywood, and then we'll be back for Dave Henderson to read from the book. And that was Lost in Hollywood of System of a Down. You're listening to Maluti FM 97.1, the program, Santini Irglas. I'm Emaurans Fourie, your host until 4 o'clock. So we're speaking to Dave Henderson in Cape Town. Dave, you're going to read a little bit of that book for us.
I am. So I'd like to give my condolences to that song that I believe was cut short horribly. But yeah, you're 100% right. So I'd like to read from Angela de Egville's book, Into the Lion's Den, a true story set in 1820 Africa. So let me know when I can start reading.
You're welcome to.
Perfect.
We're all ears.
I'm going to start at the beginning, where one should start, the introduction, and this basically sets the tone for the reader. So it's before the book jumps into the meat, but it gives you a very good feel for what's in the book. So each person has a story to tell. Some people and families pass through this world undetected. Others have their stories broadcast. Some trail into the past, are easy to trace, whilst others remain elusive. It seems in most families, there is one person curious enough to find out more about ancestors whose lives have a direct influence on the present. Genetics, DNA, lifestyle choices, and the power of words shape and mold people throughout generations. Sometimes descendants are unwittingly touched by unseen blessings or curses passed down through their family lineage. This story began as a simple linear journey, but after years of research it evolved into a colorful tapestry of the Daniel clan. Names of the Daniel ancestors and their descendants, dates of birth, marriages, and deaths found in various archives throughout Ireland, France, South Africa, and the United Kingdom form part of the initial research. Daniel genealogists added valuable contributions. The facts soon developed a mind of their own and unfolded into a living, breathing narrative with real characters from the past demanding to have their stories told. This is a chronicle of the Daniel family of Africa, as the author perceives it. Although based on actual facts, it is a work of fiction. Into the Lion's Den, the Daniel family of Africa, is a novel about an 1820 settler family in South Africa. It begins in the refined jewelry and theatre worlds of Regency London and Edinburgh in the United Kingdom. It then winds its way into the forbidding world of the rugged, untamed Africa of the early 19th century. It is not a history of South Africa, although the author has endeavored to keep dates and facts accurate. Some characters were real people who lived in that era, whilst others are fictional. It is a love story. It's a tale of the power of man to overcome adversity and win, sometimes. It is a story of the fight for survival of varied cultures in an unforgiving land, each fighting for the same right to life, land and liberty. Every culture has different ideals and their own ideas about how to best obtain them. They have differing perceptions of what freedom means. Throughout history, we have heard various voices crying out to be heard. The Daniel family, like other migrants to southern Africa, experienced these differences firsthand. From necessity, they merged their own culture and identities with that of others, not only for the sake of their survival, but also for the sake of peace and progress. Colonialists came from a different world and culture, and as such imposed themselves and their ways on the lands they inhabited, in a way which was both foreign and unprecedented to the local people. To this day, South Africa remains a cultural melting pot, as the immense diversity of peoples who call the land home continue to strive for common ground. In 1996, former President of South Africa, Nelson Mandela, had the following to say in his speech to rededicate the monument buildings and memorial dedicated to the 1820 settlers after it burnt down in 1994. It overlooks present-day Makanda, formerly Grandstown. So the next bit seems to be a quote from Nelson Mandela. There are monuments which stand as mute pointers to a fixed and ever-receding past. Devoid of life, they have little meaning outside the history books and the minds of learned people. This national monument is not of that kind. Pawns in a larger game, the 1820 settlers came to the part of Africa at the behest of an imperial power, seeking to use its own poor and unemployed in a bid to advance conquest and imperial ambitions. Through their own impulse to freedom rendered them largely unsuitable for that task, they were nevertheless caught up on the wrong side of history, unable or unwilling to acknowledge as equals those into whose homeland they had been implanted. Founders of the monument 2 decades ago sought to redeem that limitation, without denying it, by dedicating the monument to the universal application of the ideals which the English settlers cherished for themselves. Today, our country, a democracy, and our people masters of their own destiny, we are rededicating the monument to the universality of those ideals at a time when we are working together to make them a reality for all.